good morning. Thank you for your time today. We're always grateful to be able to connect with you all. My name is Bruce Anthony, and I'm one of the trainers with CERVIS Technologies. Before we get started, I wanted to point out that I have several colleagues on the call today who will be able to answer your questions via the chat function, so please feel free to ask away throughout the webinar. They'll answer your questions directly, and they'll also let me know of any questions they think would be helpful for the entire group. I do also want to note that if they don't have time to answer your question immediately, or if you have to leave before you receive a response, our customer support team will reach out to you after the webinar. So the plan for today is to cover the options that you have available for integrating service with your website. This meeting is intended to show you the options available to you and introduce several new concepts that have recently been added. But for specific details about your website or your console, it would be best to schedule a web integration meeting with our team directly. This is a 30-minute meeting that we offer to you for free that will walk through more specific examples as well as help you decide what would be best for your organization. So to schedule that meeting, you can simply ask a question in the webinar or contact our customer support team afterward. But also, please feel free to write in any questions that you have, and our team on the call will respond to you directly. So that being said, let's jump into what options are available when you're embedding service into your website. So there's two main routes that you can go. First is using the standalone version of service and linking to specific pages from your website. And the second option is a direct HTML iframe integration. So the standalone version of service is an option you can utilize if you prefer to link out to your console rather than having it directly embedded into your website. The standalone version can be at a servicetech.com URL, but you can also utilize custom domains or set up custom domains to have it at a unique service address or even at your own domain. So there's two domain mapping options I just mentioned. We have an article that walks through what those two options are, and you can find this article via our support tool. Whenever you're logged into Service, at the bottom of the page, you'll see a Need Help option, and that's how you access our customer support tool. And if you just search for domain mapping, you'll find this article. But this walks through what those two options are. You can create a custom subdomain, or you can create a full custom domain. So let me just briefly lay these out. A custom subdomain is pretty straightforward. You could do this today very quickly. This is just a way for you to have kind of a customized service URL. So the default URL is www.servicetech.com. You can customize that with a subdomain, meaning you would have something like demofoodbank.servicetech.com. or demofoodbank.serve.is. Really, you can actually do whatever you want as the custom domain. You'd make it something obviously that relates to your organization that would be easy for volunteers to remember or utilize. But you can do kind of anything you'd like to within that. And then what that does is it just makes it a friendlier place for volunteers to go if you're linking out to the system directly. So instead of having it just say servicetech.com, it could have your kind of subdomain flair on there. It just helps people identify that they're in the right place. It's kind of another way to help volunteers feel more at home. So that's that subdomain option. Again, this is very simple. There's three things that you have to choose. One is what your subdomain is. Again, the example I keep using is Demo Food Bank, but this would just be like your URL or like a shortened URL or something that would be easy for your volunteers to remember. And then you pick which service domain you want to utilize. So we have a number of options here. It doesn't have to be servicetech.com. It could be service.tech or serve.is. There's a number of options in here, and you basically just pick from this list. And then you can pick what your default landing page is. And that would be something like either your event listing page or the direct volunteer application. There's some options in here that you can choose between. Once you've made those three decisions, though, all you need to do is submit a support request, and our customer support team will update this for you immediately. So again, this is a very simple thing to do, and it also, if you are using the standalone version of Service for a lot of how your volunteers engage with the console, it just makes it kind of a friendlier place for volunteers to be. The second custom option here is a full custom domain. This is a little bit more involved, but what this allows you to do is to have a service domain on your URL, essentially. So basically, in this case, you pick from a couple predetermined prefixes like service or volunteer, and then you would use your actual domain for that. So there's some technical steps within this. I'm not going to go through all of these directly. The biggest one is that your IT department or whomever manages your website will need to update your DNS record. And there's an article here about how to do that. And it basically walks through all of the steps that you need. It's essentially a tutorial for going through that section. So basically your IT can follow this directly. But what this option allows you to do, so the full custom domain, allows you to have more control over what this looks like. So instead of just saying www.servicetech.com, this domain could be something like volunteer.demofoodbank.org or service.demofoodbank.org. Really, whatever your domain is would be the main portion of that URL. And then you can have a prefix for that. So it's really easy to tell volunteers what page to send them to. You could just say volunteer.demofoodbank.org, and then it would take them directly to what you've chosen as your default landing page. So this is a really nice way to make it look more cohesive. Again, kind of keep people within your domain, but not necessarily have to do an embed if you prefer to do standalone links. So those new custom domain options are relatively new. So if you haven't heard of them before, that's probably why. Again, the default is servicetech.com. So that subdomain mapping is really easy. You can do that today if you want to. The full custom domain requires a few more steps from your IT, but it's also pretty straightforward, and you could start that process today if you wanted as well. So I want to turn our attention to what this standalone console looks like. So if you do choose to use the standalone links, this is kind of what the pages will look like. Now, this is my demo console, obviously, and this is our event listing page. So you can see here, the content of the page is mostly what volunteers will be engaging with, right? This is where your events get posted publicly. And if someone's interested in something, they can click on that and register for it. As you probably know, as a part of the registration process, they'll end up creating a new profile if they don't already have one. So the event listing page is a really good place to send volunteers, and the standalone version looks like this. So basically the service content is within this page here. There is an outside kind of background color. There's a header at the top of the page. There's also, or there can be a footer at the bottom of the page. All of these things can be customized. So you can customize the background color. You can customize all the colors within service, like when you mouse over an event, depending on its availability, you can have that color change. You can also change, of course, all the fonts. You can change the text in here. You can change the title at the top of the page. The header and the footer of the standalone pages is full HTML that you can edit. So if you want this to match your website or to have a background image or things like that, you can. Now, the default version of this page, if you're looking at your own console, the background is white and it just has your logo in the middle. There's a number of things you can do here, and we do have a couple knowledge base articles about how to get started with that. If you have any questions about that, again, just search our knowledge base for custom header, custom footer, that would bring up those articles. So that's what this standalone page looks like. And obviously there's different pages you can link your volunteers to, but this would all be at a standalone that you'd be linking out to. So the second option that you have in terms of how to integrate service into your website is really more of a direct integration, and that's an HTML iframe page. So basically what that would do is it would take the service content and put it directly into your website. So you can see in this case, we're actually on our main website here. The event listing page is being embedded directly. I have some kind of a wrapper around that. I have some buttons over here, and up at the top of the page, kind of our normal header with all of our navigation options. So this is just actually embedded directly into our website. We're not sending people to the standalone version. This is embedded directly into our page. So from here, of course, volunteers can engage with this like normal. They can sign up for events. They can create their profile as a part of the registration process. They can even log into their account. Again, this is all just on the event listing page, but there's a number of pages you can obviously choose to embed as well. So we'll talk about those pages in a minute here. I do want to mention one very important thing, and that is if you do choose to embed service using an iframe, you will need to set up a full custom domain like we talked about previously. There's some technical reasons for this, but the gist of it is that some browsers will block cross-domain cookies from embedded pages like this. And using a custom domain will tell the browser that you've given permission to Service to be where it is, essentially. So again, in order to do this type of direct integration with an iframe, you do need to do that full custom domain. Again, the instructions on how to do that are directly within this article, and this lays it out for your IT as well, what they'll need to do. All right, so let's go back to this embedded page. I want to point out a couple different options that I've chosen to do that might be relevant for you. So again, right here, I just have my event listing page. If we go back to kind of my volunteer home page, I've listed that, the event listing page, I've called it the event calendar here, but I also have a link for my new volunteers, a direct application, and then I also have a link to our group request form. The group request form, just as a reminder, is a way for you to capture information from external organizations, groups, clubs, churches, community groups, things like that that are working with you. But yeah, so I have a number of different links directly embedded there. And then once a volunteer clicks into any of those, they're actually presented with some more options. So I have some other things over here on the right-hand side. I have the direct application, kind of already mentioned that. But I also have an event link directly. So you can also send people to a specific event if you'd like to do that. If I click on this food pantry shifts here, again, this is all on my website, but this is something that you can very easily implement if you choose to go this route. So you can see here I'm sending people to a specific event. They don't have to click to find that event. They don't have to search for it. I just have a button going straight into this event. This is a time slot event. So once they're in here, they can just go and pick a shift that they want to sign up for. I've also given people an option to search for events by location. So if you click on this events by location button here, you can see I have 4 different cities listed. In my system, these are interest categories. So in your system, your interest categories might be programs, might be departments. It might be something like locations or different warehouses or buildings, things like that. But in my system, these are interest categories. So if a volunteer clicks on, for example, Colorado Springs down here, then it would take them back to the event listing page. But this is filtered now so that volunteers are only seeing events within that interest category. So you can have different landing pages for different types of events by program or department. Whatever interest categories you have in your system can drive how those events are embedded into your website. If, for example, you're kind of working with a sister organization and you have different websites, you could have your events posted on your website, and your sister organization could have their events posted on their website, and volunteers would basically see those separately, even if you're using the same console for that. So that's that events by location, which again, really is representative of interest categories. So I have a few other things here too, like pick a date. This is just the calendar view version of the event listing page. Volunteers first just choose what day they want to sign up for. And then from there, it shows them what shifts are available on that day. And they can choose to sign up directly, or if they want to learn more about it, it takes them to the page for that event to show them all the details. So again, 2 more just quick ones. The group request form, we already looked at that earlier. The project request form is sort of a similar concept. It's an open form, but in this case, it's letting volunteers give you an idea for an event or project. But those are just some of the pages. This is not an exhaustive list of all the possible things you could choose to embed on your website. That list is in the article, Integrating Service into Your Existing Website. So again, this is a part of our knowledge base. You can easily search for it. If you just search for integrating or website, this will be one of the first ones that pops up. And there's a short YouTube tutorial here. This kind of talks about that process some more. But this page contains all the instructions that you need. And then it also contains all of the code that you would need if you choose to do an iframe integration, as well as what pages those represent. So again, this is more of an exhaustive list of all the possible pages that you could choose to embed. At the bottom of this article, it does also contain links to the external console. So if you prefer to do the standalone version of Service and not have that embedded, those external links are down here as well. So if you just want to link like to your admin login page or the event registration page or event registration filtered by an interest category, right? All of those links are replicated in here as well. And then if we scroll even further in this document, there's another set of those links that are the shortened URL versions. So again, these are all the possible pages that you could choose to embed. The best thing to do if you have questions about this or about what pages you want to utilize would be to schedule that web integration meeting. So during the course of that call, it's a one-on-one meeting, and basically we would just go through what pages would be useful for you to include based on how your program is structured, and then essentially what all the technical information is within here as well about how to do that. So of course, if you have any questions about that, feel free to write those in. But this article really contains all that you would need to get started within that. All right, so we've looked at the two kind of main ways that you can have volunteers engage with your system, whether that's the standalone version of the system, where you're sending direct links out to specific pages, or if you choose to embed service directly. And both of those options obviously come with different ways that you can modify the way that the system looks. So if you want to add colors or change the text or do anything like that, all of those settings are found in the system configuration. So let's just step away for a moment to actually look at those settings. So we're going to go to the admin login page here, and we're just going to log in as an administrator. In the system configuration, under system management, if you click on edit system configuration, is where you'll find all of the settings to modify the way that your console looks. And there's two main sections that we should pay attention to in here. The first is page content. In the page content section, you can change things like, for example, the event listing page heading. So if you want to change what the title of that page is, you can do that. And then directly below that is the welcome message. Welcome messages in Service are basically those intro paragraphs that you'll see in a number of different places. So this is a good place to look if you want to start customizing information in your console. So the page content section contains all those welcome messages. And then the other place to look in the system configuration is under system appearance. So this is towards the bottom as well. Under system appearance is where your logo is housed. If you want to change this, contact our support team. Below that, we can see this is where the custom console header and footer are. So I mentioned this previously. For the standalone version of Service, that would be this header at the top of the page and this footer at the bottom. And again, you have full control over the HTML within those sections. To edit that, click on the three dots here for this section, and then click on the source code button, which appears in there. So that's where those are found. This is also where you'll find all of the different colors within your console. So if you want to change the background color or the page background color or the text colors or hyperlink or hover over, any of those things, those are modified within here directly. If you know the hex number, if it's a part of your website already, you can just change that directly. Otherwise, you can also click on these color boxes to choose between an RGB color or a named color or use an RGB slider. And that's also true, I mentioned this earlier, for the event listing page. When you hover over an event based on its availability, that'll change the color of that event. So you can change those colors down here as well if you want them to match your website better. You don't have direct access to the CSS within Service, but you can choose between 4 different system form styles, and those are represented here. So by default, this first one is typically selected, which is basically just flat. There's no drop shadows. As you go down the list, it adds drop shadows and rounds corners on the different elements. So one other really important note for modifying the way that Service looks is your system-wide font. So you can change the font in your entire console at one time by using this button here, or this menu item here rather. We use Google Fonts, so anything in the Google Font library can be added if it's not already a part of this. Just submit a support request. But again, that does have to be a part of the Google Font library. And if you don't know what these fonts look like, obviously you can click on this View Font Samples to see what they look like. All right, so that's where most of your customization takes place in terms of making Service match your website better or kind of stand out in different ways. And so we've talked about really the two main concepts today, which is the standalone version of Service. If you want to send people to a separate standalone link as opposed to sending them to your a Service Tech domain. But then we also talked about the direct web integration. So if you want to have the system embedded directly in your website, there's a number of options you can do here and a number of ways to customize this, as well as, of course, a lot of different pages that you can choose to use. So the best way to figure out what's best for you would be to schedule that personal web integration meeting, but I did want to show you kind of what options are available within that. So if we have any questions, I'd be happy to take those at this time. So feel free to write those in here. Okay, so a question came in about this page that we're looking at right now. This is, just to clarify, this is on our website. So this is a Service Tech example. If you choose to embed service into your website, it's not going to look exactly like this. This is something that we built. But the iframe being within the page is what I was demoing. So I just want to be clear on that. So that's a good question. Basically, we're talking about this iframe here being embedded into your website. So again, we have our service branding at the top, our navigation options here, and we built out like this sidebar. But if this is embedded into your website, this would obviously have your logo and your navigation bar at the top because it would be on your website. Okay, so I did get another question here about embedding a reservation code directly. So there's a number of options in terms of what pages you can choose to embed into your website. Pretty much all of those are laid out directly in this document, integrating service into your existing website. You can have a filter for a direct event registration page if you want to. For reservation codes, that's something that's actually generated when you create a reservation code itself. So this is typically something that you would actually be sending out to volunteers. So that would be more like the standalone version rather than embedding it directly. But when you create a reservation code, which, just to be clear again, and in case anyone's not familiar with that concept, a reservation code is a way for you to set aside a certain number of positions for an outside group or even an internal group. But basically, you're saving a certain number of spots for a specific set of volunteers. So you can create reservation codes under event or project management in reservation management. And once you've created a reservation code, that will generate this direct link option. So this reservation code link. And you can just click on that link and then copy and paste this basically to send that out to volunteers. So there's two versions of the link, but they both do the exact same thing. One is a shortened version, so that's kind of nicer if it's like social media related or if you just want like a cleaner looking URL. But basically, when you copy that link out, if you email that to someone or send that to somebody, what that does is it takes them directly to the event listing page and automatically applies that reservation code. So that's a specific type of link that you might send out to people. That's not something that generally would be embedded directly within your website per se, but that is certainly something that you would want to send out in scenarios like if a group is working with you, then you probably want to send that out to them. So again, this link is something that you get directly through the system in the reservation code section. You don't have to try to piece it together using the code or numbers or things like that. You can just copy that link directly out of the console. So a question came in about adding images to your console in different capacities. It's a great question. You can add images in a number of different ways. So if you want to add a picture to a particular event, you can do that through the event itself. So once you've created an event in Service, if you go into Search and Manage Existing Events, and then click into Update an Event or Manage an Event rather, on the right-hand side is a location where you can view or update an event photo. So you can attach an image to an event directly through here. This is uploaded from your computer to the event directly. And then that would just show up in the event listing page when volunteers are looking at the event. These images are not emailed out in the confirmation or reminder messages, but it would be a place where you could attach images directly to an event. If you want an image attached in another section, like at the top of the event listing page, so before all of your events are posted, there's an image at the top. That's done in the same place we looked earlier, that page content section in the system configuration. So if we go into Edit System Configuration, again down to Page Content, then you have the welcome messages in here, and you can use these sections to embed images. You can see there's a button here directly to insert or edit an image, and that could be something that you've uploaded to Service previously via the file management section, or it could be an image that's online somewhere. You could link out to it. All right, well, it seems like we got to all the questions that need to be answered here. Again, if you do have any further questions or more specific questions about your system or about how to embed it directly in your website or what recommendations we might have for you, then we'd be happy to schedule a free 30-minute web integration. Just let us know. Reach out to customer support. or just reach out to somebody and let them know you want to schedule that meeting, and we'll get a hold of you to set that up. But thank you for attending today.